If you've ever wondered what kind of things you need to include when you're building an aggro deck or what your process should be, that's what we're going to go over today. We're going to work out how to build an aggro deck, and I'm going to go over the key things that you need to keep in mind when you're trying to play aggro that you don't want to miss. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be building an aggro deck and talking about the general strategy for building aggro decks. So don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any future videos. Okay, so let's go to the deck builder. Now, first of all, before we start building our deck, there are a few things that we need to go over to make sure that our aggro deck is going to be really effective. So these are the key things for aggro decks. First of all, an aggro deck is a deck that's very aggressive. It's one that aims to win the game as soon as possible. Your strategy should be to kill the opponent before they get a chance to do any of their good stuff, before they can assemble their combos, before they can get to their big, massive creatures, their planeswalkers, their board wipes. We want to kill them before they get a chance to do all that. So basically, we want to get fast creatures, cheap creatures, and as much direct damage or evasion as we can get. This means that we're basically going to have a really low mana curve. So once we start putting cards into our deck, we can have a look at the mana curve for the deck, and once we have them in here, we'll see that we'll have basically the majority of our cards are going to be 1s, 2s, or 3s. We might have some 4s. We probably won't have any 5s or above, because we want to end the game before turn 4 or 5. We don't want to be casting bigger things. We want to get out all of our 1s, 2s, and 3s and do as much damage as we can with those. We're going to need to decide what colors we want to work with. So when you're building an aggro deck, the colors that tend to work best for this kind of thing would be white or red or green. Green might be a bit more rampy, but white and red are probably the primary colors for building aggro decks. You can build a kind of aggro black deck. There are ways of doing that. With blue, it's kind of slightly different. You can build a deck that aims to win fast. It's not quite the same as building one of these aggro decks. Because mono red is like the most popular aggro deck out there at the moment, I'm going to ignore that and I'm going to go to white for this one. So we're going to build a white aggro deck, and now that we've decided what color we're going to go with, in fact, one other thing I should say is that when you're deciding on the color, we could go for white and red. We could build an aggro deck that's Boros, white and red. But when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you have the right lands. So you want to make sure that you have a good number of these rare lands, the ones that come in untapped in different situations. Or we have, the Battlefield Forge is the one that does damage to you when you tap it. Sundown Pass is the one that comes out, if it's the third or later land, it comes out untapped. If it comes out earlier, it is tapped. So you want to make sure you have things that are untapped as often as possible. This one that you can't quite see behind me there is the one that has both basic types, so mountains and plains, but it always comes in tapped. And then we have the Wind-Scarred Crag, which always comes in tapped but gains you life. So those ones probably aren't going to be as useful for aggro decks. If you want to make a white and red aggro deck, you can use these. I wouldn't use the one with the basic land types unless for some reason you're building one that actually requires that. So maybe if you're using something like Lay Down Arms that cares about how many planes you have, maybe you want to use that. But otherwise, you could use Wind-Scarred Crag. But if you have lands that come in tapped, especially at the beginning, you're going to really slow down your game plan of winning on turn 4 or 5 because you're going to miss a turn or not be able to get your biggest thing out as early as possible. So it's not ideal. You probably want to use more pain lands because we don't tend to care so much about our own life when we're attacking. You don't tend to block. You don't tend to worry about your life points because you're going to do more damage to the opponent quicker than they can do damage to you. But we're going to stick to just white for now. And the next thing we need to decide is what kind of synergy we're going for. So it could be something like choosing a creature type, and we're going to go work around that creature type. Or we could just find other good aggro cards that we like the look of and build one around that. So what I'm going to do for our deck is I'm going to go with a humans deck because humans are just good for aggro at the moment. So I'm just searching. When you're using the deck builder, you can search different types. So if you just do T equals and then type in the creature type, it will pick up anything that has human as a subtype under creature. So it gets rid of all the other creatures. So we can look at everything that's going to work together with each other with humans. Now we might want to do something like pick a card that will benefit all other humans. So we know if we fill out our deck with as many humans as possible, if we have something like the Coppercoat Vanguard that gives other humans +1/+0 and Ward 1, then if we have lots of humans, we're going to be doing lots and lots of damage. So first of all, I'm just going to put those in there. So now that we've got that in there, we want to look for basically any other humans that are going to add to our plan of doing as much damage as quickly as possible. So one card that I really like is a Recruitment Officer because it's a human. It's a 2/1 for 1 mana, which is pretty good. And also you have some benefit in possibly being able to draw extra cards. We don't want the game to go on too long, but if it does go on long enough, if we don't have what we need in our hand, we can pay 4 mana to look at the top 4 cards of our library, reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less, and put it into our hand. So it works really well when we have lots of creatures that are mana value 3 or less. If the game happens to go on a little bit longer, we don't really want it to go on that long, but if it does, then that's fine. Okay, so other humans we can add. We want to have some versatility. We want to have as many humans as possible, but something like Cathar Commando, it's a 3/1, which is, it's got lots of power. It's flash, which means we can use it for a trick as well. And also we can pay 1 to sacrifice it, destroy artifacts or enchantments. So that can be pretty versatile. If the opponent has an enchantment or an artifact that's really causing trouble for us, we can get rid of it. And if not, we've got 3/1, which with Coppercoat Vanguards could be a lot stronger. So we might put some of those in there. Maybe not loads. We'll see. There's some other cards that definitely should go in there first. Also, we've got Hopeful Initiate, which can train, so it can add +1 counters on it, and you can pay 3 to remove +1 counters to destroy artifacts or enchantments as well. So it's good to have that versatility there. Lunarch Veteran will help us gain life whenever a creature enters the battlefield. If we have lots of cheap creatures, we're going to have lots of creatures entering the battlefield, so gaining that life will help us not need to block as much as possible. And it's a human, so it's going to get stronger as well. So we're going to throw those in there as well. We could add Chaplain of Arms. So it's a 1/1 first strike, Ward 1. So it's a good blocker against anything with 1 toughness, or won't get blocked by things that have 1 toughness because they'll just die. And because it's a human, then Coppercoat Vanguard, if we get that out, will basically make this a bigger first strike creature. So we could put those in. We will refine the deck a bit at the end, so we can just throw things in for now and then see what works. So those are a good number of humans. We do have lots of other things we could add, but I think we'll go with that for now. Moving on, Intrepid Adversary is a 3/1 for 2, which is the same as we had with the Cathar Commando, but you can also pay more and get +1 counters effectively on everything, and also has lifelink, which is also really good against other aggro decks. We could do something like Knight of Dawn's Light. It's first strike. When we gain life, we gain that much life +1, so whenever other creatures are coming in, we're going to gain even more. And it has the added ability of being able to pay 2 to give it +1/+1. If it's got first strike, it's kind of scary. So we could add those in there. Maybe just a couple for now. In fact, I'll just put all 4 in there for now, and then we'll just take some out when we need to. We could do Resolute Reinforcements. The only thing with that is that it works better in a soldier deck because reinforcements are a human soldier, and then the token is not a human, it's just a soldier, so it won't benefit from the human synergies that we've got going on. If we're going to have just creatures, and we want humans, and we like First Strike, then Thalia is a good one to add because it's going to slow down anything the opponent has that would be non-creatures. So let's just put that in there. We could go with something like Sun Gold Sentinel. This worked really well for me in the past, but I haven't used it as much recently. But it's a human, it's a 3/2. When it enters, you can exile cards from the graveyard. We need to think about what else is happening in the meta at the moment. If there's lots of reanimators, because there are big things you can reanimate, like Atraxas, Atalis, T-Rexes, things like that, then, well, or what's the other one? Toxrill, all those big things. If the opponent's going to be reanimating all these things, we might want some way of dealing with the graveyard. So this is one way we could possibly do that. And also it has the added ability of being able to pay 2 mana and choose a color. It gains hexproof from that color, and it can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So if this is a 3/2, and it might be boosted by other things, like the Intrepid Adversary or the Coppercoat Vanguard, if we can pay 2 mana, so this can't be blocked, this might get through some last damage. So we want to keep an eye out for anything with evasion in that way, so we can get past to the opponent and they can't block. So normally with red, you would have Lightning Strikes or Stoke the Flames or anything that could do direct damage to the opponent's face. In this case, we want something that for some reason isn't blockable. We want any way to make things unblockable or go too wide so the opponent can't deal with those as well. So we can go with Adeline, which helps us go wide as well. 3 mana star 4 comes out as a 1/4, I guess. Power equal to the number of creatures we control. It makes extra creatures itself when we attack with anything else. So it's a great way to get a big thing that is kind of hard to kill for other aggro decks because it's got 4 toughness and it can help us go wider. We can put 4 in there. The only thing with these legendary creatures is that when you have 4 in the deck, you might have 2 in your hand, and having 2 in your hand is not really any good. If you have 1 on the battlefield, then the other one in your hand is kind of a dead card. So we could try this in a way where you only have 3 of these legendary cards, or you could have 4. If you think they're basically going to get killed, if they're going to be the big targets the opponent wants to get rid of really quickly, then having 4 isn't terrible because we know the opponent's going to kill them and you want to replace them with another one. So we need some other creatures. We're on 59 out of 60 at the moment. So I might have to take out some planes because when you have such a low curve like this, at the moment, it's just all 1s and 2s apart from a couple of 3s. We don't need to have 40. We don't need to have 24 lands in the deck because we're going to have too many lands. We're going to be drawing lands more often than we want to. So the next thing we'll definitely need is some kind of removal. Now we could use something like Lay Down Arms because it works on the number of planes that we have. But with Brutal Cathar, we're kind of getting 2 things for the price of 1. We're getting a creature and we're exiling an opponent's creature as well. The downside is that when the Brutal Cathar dies, the other creature comes back, unless it was a token, in which case it disappears forever. But also, if it does turn to nighttime at any point, if we don't cast something or our opponent doesn't cast something, then this turns into the Brute, the red side, which becomes a 3/3, has First Strike. It's not a human anymore, so it won't benefit from the human synergies, but it's still going to have First Strike and be a 3/3 and have Ward, pay 3 life. So it's kind of hard for the opponent to deal with. And when we cast 2 spells on our next turn, then it's going to flip back to Brutal Cathar and it could exile a second creature, exile another one. So being able to double spell or control day or night is pretty good with the Brutal Cathar. It's nice to have removal that's also creatures. Because if we have things like Lay Down Arms and we have Thalia out, maybe the opponent has one as well, it's going to cost 2 more mana than normal. Or at least it's going to cost 1 more if we're using it. So although you could have Lay Down Arms, Ossification, Fateful Absence, we could do, it's probably better to have Brutal Cathar. Right, so we're on 63. I'm going to take this down to, should we go down to 20 planes? I generally wouldn't go less than 20. So if we're going to go with that, yeah, 20 planes is probably all we need. There are some times you might want to cast more than one thing. I guess if they're all small things, it works out. So, okay, and then there's one other thing we could add to this deck. Well, we could add Anointed Peacekeeper. It's a good card to add. It's a human, it has vigilance, and it can basically take something of the opponent's out of their hand, or at least make it cost 2 more to cast it, or to activate the abilities of it. It's really good against Planeswalkers if it makes them pay 2 in order to use the Planeswalker's abilities. But I'm not going to use it in this deck. What I'm going to use is I'm going to add the Knight Errant of Eos, because it's 5 mana, but it does have Convoke, so we can get it out earlier, and we're going to have lots of other creatures, so getting this out, it's not too difficult. We're on 61. Let's take out maybe one of the chaplains. Or maybe one of the knights. This isn't like the top meta deck. This is just basically putting something together that's kind of budget friendly. It does use quite a few rares, like Hopeful Initiate, Intrepid Adversaries and Mythic, Sungold Sentinel, Thalia, Adeline, Brutal Cathar, and the Knight. They're all rares or some mythics, but we do have lots of uncommons. Are there any commons? I don't think so. Chaplain. Oh yeah, so Lunarch Veteran is a common. Recruitment Officer's uncommon. Cathar Commando is a common. Coppercoat's an uncommon. And Knight of Dawn's Light is uncommon. And that's it. So we've got quite a few common and uncommon cards. They aren't all rares and mythics, which is a good thing. So if we have a look at the mana curve now for the deck, we do have mostly 1s and 2s. We have some 3s, not quite so many. And yes, we have a 5, but it's going to be cheaper unless the opponent's destroyed everything. But if we do manage to, we want to convoke as much as possible with this, because the more we convoke, the more we can get from our deck. We can always look at the top 6 cards. We can always choose 2 creatures, but the mana value of the creatures is equal to the number of convoked creatures we use. So if we use 3 creatures to convoke the Knight Errant of Eos, then we can get up to 2 creatures that have mana value 3 or less. And that means we're only actually paying 2 mana to get this 4/4 out. So it's a pretty good deal. So to go over the checklist of things we want to make sure we have in an aggro deck, we have lots of cheap creatures, a really low mana curve, so we're going to be able to play a lot out really quickly. We have good synergies because we're able to look for other creatures with mana value 3 or less, or we can use the Knight to look for other creatures in the top of our library. We make non-creatures cost more, which is going to most likely disadvantage our opponent and have no disadvantage on us. We're able to go wide, make lots of humans, and we're able to make those humans stronger with things like Coppercoat and Intrepid. So there are different ways that we can do that, but we can also remove artifacts and enchantments with Hopeful Initiate and Cathar Commando. So we have a good amount of versatility. We're going to be gaining life, drawing extra cards effectively. We don't have any cards in the deck that are draw cards, but we're able to basically get creatures from the top of our library in effectively the same way if we need to. And then we've also got a bit of evasion or ways of doing extra damage to the opponent if they start to put up a bit of a defense. So going wide is one thing. Having things like First Strike that makes the opponent not want to block is a good way to start getting some damage through. And being able to attack with something like Knight of Dawn's Light, and if the opponent has a 3/3 and you're attacking with this, they won't want to block if you have 2 mana available, because they know you can pump up the Knight to make it a 3/3 and their creature would die. But if they then choose to not block, you can still do that damage for 2 and then spend that 2 mana somewhere else. So it's a good way of being able to hold the opponent at kind of ransom, so they can't defend where they would like to defend, because there's things you can do. So yeah, there's a lot of versatility there, a lot of things working together, and Also, one other type of evasion we have in this deck is flying. Now, none of these creatures fly to start with, but we do have Chaplain of Arms. When it dies, we can pay 4 mana to disturb, cast it from the graveyard, and it's now a 2/1 first strike flyer. It also gives all of our other creatures Ward 1, which is really good if the opponent's trying to target removal us with, go for the throat, cut down, and things like that. It's a shame it's a Spirit Cleric when it comes back and not a Human Cleric, because it won't benefit from the other boosts that we have. Although Intrepid Adversary will be able to boost it as well, but Coppercoat Vanguard wouldn't. So it still could potentially get a bit of a boost. If the opponent can't deal with a flying first strike creature, then we're going to get the last bit of damage through that way. And also we've got Lunarch Veteran comes back. It's a spirit again rather than a human. It's only a 1/1, but it's extra flying creatures, and that can also benefit from Intrepid Adversary. So we can just get that through, hopefully, if we need to. And then the last thing, like I said, is being able to evolve or adapt to whatever the current meta is. So at the moment, because we have lots of mono red, having some kind of life gain is going to be able to mitigate that. If you're against mono red, they're doing damage to you, but you're gaining 1, 2, or 3 life per turn, then they're not going to be able to keep up. So you're going to win that way. If there's lots of reanimator targets at the current meta, then you want to have more things like Sun Gold Sentinel that's going to be able to take things out from a graveyard so the opponent can't cast it or can't do anything with that. If there's lots of enchantments or artifacts, you want to have more things that can deal with that. So it just depends on what else is going on at the moment or what kind of decks you tend to see. If you see a lot of decks that use artifacts, have a lot more in your deck that will deal with artifacts, especially if they're early on. Because if the current meta is big artifacts that cost lots, then if you're playing aggro, you probably won't see those big artifacts because you're going to kill the opponent ideally before they get there. But if there's lots of little artifacts that you need to deal with, then you might want to have something that deals with them. So it just completely depends on the type of deck you're going to be facing off against. And you might want to include different things in your deck because of that. So that is our mono white human aggro deck. We're not going to go into games right now, but if you want to try out the deck, I'll leave the deck list in the description below. So you can try it out if you want, or you can just build your own. You might not have exactly the same cards I have. You might not have 4 copies of Thalia. You might not have the Knight. You might not have all the Brutal Cathars. Whatever you do have, you want to try to include these kind of principles when you're building your decks. You want to have some removal, some versatility, some kind of card advantage, the right kind of mana curve, the right kind of synergies. So if you don't have these, you could put other humans in that can do just as good a job. You could even, if you want to go with some other kind of synergies, maybe looking at other flying creatures, because there are some good flying creatures like, where is it? One of these gives something else flying. There we go. The Griffwing Cavalry, it trains, and whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 and give another attacking creature without flying. So if you give something like Adeline flying, and it's a 6/4 at that point, then you're going to get a lot of other damage through that way. So you don't have to do exactly what I've done. You don't have to pick these cards. You don't have to copy the biggest, most popular meta deck at the moment. You can just look for other synergies, follow the principles of being able to get lots of damage through quickly and some kind of evasion or direct damage at the end if possible, because otherwise, once the opponent puts out a shield red or some big blockers or gains a bit of life, then it's going to be hard to finish them off. You want something that's going to help you on turn 4, turn 5 to do that last bit of damage just to finish them off. And that's all we have time for with the deck building today. So let me know in the comments below what you think of this kind of deck. Do you like playing aggro? How would you like to build aggro? I know mono red is the most popular thing at the moment, but if you're being different to mono red, what kind of things do you like to make? So let me know that in the comments below. And thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next one.